Just when will the Spurs win?
You are Locked On Spurs, your daily San Antonio Spurs podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Spurs right here on the Locked On NBA Network. I'm your host, Jeff Garcia, Spurs writer for Kens 5 San Antonio. Glad to have you back. Hopefully everybody's having a good week and getting ready to get rid of this season and look forward to the real season, that is the offseason, draft lottery, and the NBA draft. What are we talking about today? Well, we're going to be looking about this season. Is this Popovich's worst season in his career? He all but threw in the towel after their last game versus the Jazz. We'll talk about that. And then ask, when will the Spurs win again? Thanks for making Locked On Spurs your first listen each and every day. Free and available wherever you get podcasts. Let's go to bring him on. He is the man of many talents. You can hear it. He is driving and podcasting at the same time. He is Vinny Vinzetta, my colleague at Kens 5. Just, Vinny, how do you do it? How are you so multitasking right now?
I keep a list. I look at the list every day, Jeff, and check things off and make sure I know where I need to be. As busy as the fall is, it's fascinating. The spring seems to even be a little bit busier. So on the go, but hey, that's the life I chose, I guess.
Well, we'll make this short and sweet for Vinny because he has things to do, people to see, games to catch up, high school game, Wagner, all that good stuff. So make sure to follow him on Twitter. You want to do that right now. So if you're on Twitter, follow him at VVinzetta, VVINZETTA. Vinny, let's go ahead and dive into this. So after that first game versus the Jazz in that back-to-back set, the Spurs got trounced in the second half. And afterwards, Popovich all but threw in the towel for the season, saying, I'm at the point now that this team isn't built for 48 minutes. It isn't built to play a complete game. I mean, what took him so long to come around to that? Shouldn't we have seen that at maybe 2 months into the season, Vinny?
Well, he said, at this point, I'm finally comfortable saying it. So makes you wonder at 14 and 47 what took so long. But I was saying on the air on Sunday night that that's one of the best pop sound bites ever. And I know it wasn't a rant, one of his famous rants, but the way he lowered his voice inflection and said, get off my backside. We played a great 2 quarters, and then it didn't go very well. I couldn't stop laughing. It's like he was just almost having a fun moment with what's been a disaster of a season. And as you mentioned, he reiterated time and again, we're not a 48-minute team. And I kept thinking, what does that mean exactly? I mean, it's almost like, what am I doing? I'm wasting my time coaching because these guys just don't get it. But he did finish up by saying, we'll stay on them. We'll keep trying to get there and see what happens. But, he's all but ready to just say it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen at all.
Yeah. I think majority of Spurs fans, you, me, people looking from the outside in, saw that coming a mile away. I mean, it didn't take this point of the season to know this team isn't ready for the big stage yet. That being a real playoff contender, a threat in the West, threat in the NBA. They're not even close to there. Just, I know we'll talk about the draft in a bit and everything, but based on what you're seeing right now, how far do you think the Spurs are away from being that playoff team again? How much does the draft depend on that answer? Development. Do you see this as a 3, 4, 5-year work in progress?
Well, I don't have them in the finals next year, even if they land Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson or the kid from Alabama. They may get a generational talent, but I think there's still work that has to be done and more development done. Now you can shorten the stretch a little bit when they land, hopefully, one of those guys. But it doesn't mean that they're the odds-on favorite. I don't think just by getting one of those guys, but. It sure does change things immediately with the lottery, but I don't know. Can one person tie it all together? I wouldn't say entirely that, but maybe these guys as well are just kind of over what has happened. Even though, as we've discussed many times, Jeff, they understand the bigger picture here. 16 straight at this point, maybe even 17 straight, whatever it is, that's going to take a toll on anybody. These guys are. They're exhausted. They're over it, and I think the end can't come soon enough to get to the offseason.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Look, no, to their credit, they're in good spirits. I've been in that locker room after losses a handful of times this season, and it's still upbeat. You know, Keldon Johnson comes out. He's being Keldon Johnson, loud and funny and playing with the guys. And I asked him before, like, why do you do that? He goes, we got to keep up our spirits. You know, otherwise it can get really ugly. So, you know, that's good to see. But again, you know, they still got to translate to wins, and we haven't seen that. Now, Popovich has been labeled the best of the best in the business. You know, he's Hall of Fame bound. You know, he's beloved across the world. European coaches love him. You know, college coaches love him. Everything. But this has been record-wise one of the worst, if not the worst, record-wise teams he's ever had. Vinny, would you consider this his worst NBA season?
By the numbers, I would say yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a case of rinse and repeat. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And I know I've said this before. The fact that they can play 2 or 3 good quarters and there's always just one goes south where they get boat raced and the final score ends up looking much worse than maybe it should have arguably been. Yeah, it's just the same thing over and over and over. I mean, I'm tired of going on the air when I'm on set saying we've seen this movie before. It's like one of your favorite. It's like one of your favorite movies that you watch over and over and over.
It is. You know, you joke about that on like how you say that on TV. I joke about this here on Locked On Spurs, saying take any recap or preview that me, Vinny do, or anybody else have done, and just replay it. And that's what happened. I mean, that's really what happened with the Spurs.
It would seriously work. It really would work.
Yeah, it really would work. And now look, do you give the Spurs a little bit of credit in that first Utah game? Sure. You know, they were competitive. I was shocked. You know, they came out knocking down threes. I really thought that losing streak at that time was going to be snapped. But then the wheels just come off. And Vinny, they don't come off. They explode off. I mean, it's like dynamite blows up on those car wheels and they just fly everywhere. Why do you think that is? I mean, it's just so dramatic.
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. It's almost like it's just preordained that this is the way it's going to go. I mean, they just, as Pop said, they just don't have the ability to play 48, and I don't know if that's inside their heads, if it's as much of a mental thing as it is anything, if it relates to the combinations he's running out there off the bench at certain points. But yeah, they can just not at all hold it together, and it's almost expected. You almost like, when is the swoon coming? You know, we're standing by. It's going to happen. It's going to happen at some point, and get ready.
Yeah. And
which, by the way,
go ahead.
Which, by the way, I must say, weeks ago when I was on with you, I made my bold prediction. And by the way, I believe yours was at Charlotte. That didn't work out for you, and I think I predicted. My prediction was they would win at the front half of the Utah back-to-back. So no good for me. So here we are now.
Well, you got close. I think we both got close. At least you had a first half. There's at Utah, and I had almost three quarters of a game before the Hornets took over and won by 10. But yeah, but do you give Pop any slack? You know what? Hold that thought. Let's hold that thought. When we get back, we're gonna ask Vinny if we should be a little bit forgiving for Pop and this team, considering this is a rebuild right here on Locked On Spurs with Vinny Vinzetta. Follow him on Twitter at VVINZETTA. But I want to talk to you about FanDuel. Look, it's the midway point of the NBA season. It's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. You can even bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes drained. You can even make your own bets, like 2x3, 2 3-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to use FanDuel. FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlay. Don't miss out on your chance on your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We're back right here on Locked On Spurs with Vinny Vinzetta. He is my colleague at Ken's 5. He's on the TV side of things, talking all sports, and I mean all sports. That's why you hear him right now. He's driving right now to go cover some local high school sports. So, Vinny, be careful out there. We know you're driving right now. We'll make this short and sweet so you can get there in one piece. Vinny, how forgiving should we be with Popovich this season, considering we knew what the assignment was, a rebuild. We knew that a bunch of teenagers were going to be on this squad. They only had 1 year experience. Do we have to be very forgiving for Popovich this season?
I think so. I agree with that. I mean, look at the number of moving parts that have moved on and new pieces that have come in and unknowns. And again, it all goes back. I love the way you always say it. We know what the assignment has been. So, he said the first day of training camp, what the hell? Nobody should pick the Spurs. I'm just going to say it. Nobody should pick the Spurs to win it this year. And he was right. I mean, yeah, they're not going to talk ever publicly about what the mission is, but we all know, and it is what it is. It's a throwaway season, but it's a throwaway season for what's going to happen in June on draft night, and the future will look even brighter once that night comes and goes.
Yeah, I'm right there. I think you have to be forgiving for Popovich. Look, he's trying his best. He tried to light a fire with them, although in a weird spot right before the break, saying this team doesn't play defense. We suck, blah, blah, blah. He's been positive for the most part. He hasn't lashed out at you or me or any of the media too much this season. He comes in with a smile. So he's trying to be upbeat. And look, we got to understand that you lost an all-star, DeJounte Murray. You lost Derek White. You lost Jakob Poeltl. You lost big pieces that probably could have won some games in this losing streak. But it is what it is. They know it is a rebuild, and it's from scratch. Vinny, I was going to ask you, is it doom or gloom, in your opinion, if the Spurs miss out on picks 1 and 2?
I think the lottery is a little bit deeper than usual. I mean, are the first couple of guys generational talents? Yes. So I don't know if it's entirely doom and gloom, but there would be some disappointment if you don't get one of the top 2 guys, because they've stripped this thing down to nothing in order to do that, and they've gotten the results. That's bizarre to say, but they've gotten the results they want at 14 and whatever they are right now, because they stripped it down. So they've laid the foundation to get one of those guys. So if the lottery odds and numbers don't work out in their favor, sure, it would be some disappointment, but I don't know if it's entirely doom or gloom. But you want to get what you're paying the price for right now, for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I want this team to pick 1 or 2. I think they need to get pick 1 or 2. But if they get 3 or below, I don't think it's completely a bust. You're right. I agree with you. It's a little kind of deflating a bit. You're going through this. I'm going through this. Fans are going through this, saying how many are going to lose, when this is getting old already. But in order to reach the top, you got to get down to the bottom, and that's what they're doing right now. We're talking with Vinny Vinzetta, my colleague at Kens5. Follow him on Twitter at VVinzetta, VVINZETTA. Make sure you do it right now. And we're talking about Popovich this season, if this is the worst ever. Now, if there's any parallels, the last time he had a bad season, it turned into the number 1 pick, and that being Tim Duncan. The difference is, though, Vinny, is that there was already an all-world Hall of Fame player on the roster, David Robinson. That ain't going to be the situation this season. And you're right. I think if it's Scoot or Wemby, it's still going to take a while to get going. But Popovich keeps on repeating over and over again, this team may not be looking the same next season. Do you expect the Spurs to make big moves this offseason?
I do. I think. I mean, they've already shown that they're in that market. I mean, by the way that they've moved players in the last year. So they're committed to turning this thing around, and they're just not in it to be ho hum and kind of move along and see what happens. So I would think I would say yes, and it'll be curious to see what happens, because they have just lost so many pieces for the sake of the future. And
right.
As you mentioned there, so many pieces that are actually really talented, so that they're banking on the future. Like, they've laid their chips on the table, and they want to get some new pieces in here, including the lottery. I don't have the numbers in front of me to see what kind of cash they have to play with this summer beyond the draft. But I would imagine that the roster will look a lot different than it does right now. I think there's some guys on there as we finish out the regular season that won't be around when we get into next fall.
Yeah. You hear Popovich say words like We're evaluating talent for the future. You hear they're playing for contracts. So he's signaling to the team that if you want to stick around, you better show up. And this losing streak is not only testing their mettle, it's also seeing, how can they handle adversity moving forward. But we're not done.
I don't have any problem. I don't have any problem with that. No, nobody should be safe.
Yeah,
nobody should be safe. I mean, look at the results. I mean, this is everybody better show up. And it's ironic that I'm about to say this, but everybody needs to show up and play 48, and that's not happening. Yeah, but everybody needs to play for a spot for the future, no question.
Yeah, and we're kind of seeing who these players really are. We're perhaps coming to the realization that maybe Keldon isn't going to be the guy. Like maybe he's just not that yet. Who knows? Maybe the jury's still out. Maybe he needs another season to see if he can really shoulder a team to wins. We're starting to see how important Devin Vassell really is to this roster moving forward. How important Trey Jones is. So we're really trying to understand where these players can fit long term. But when we get back, speaking of long term, we're going to look ahead at the schedule and ask Vinny, just when will this losing streak end? When will it end? Hopefully never. Hopefully they just go all in and lose everything. But to really get to get one of those top 3 spots, 14% in the draft lottery, right here on Locked On Spurs. We're back right here on Locked On Spurs with my colleague at Ken's 5 TV. He is Vinny Vinzetta, and we're talking about your silver and black. So, Vinny, we're kind of hitting the afterburners here because we know you got to go. You're a busy man. But let's make it very clear. We're recording this before that second game, the last game of the rodeo road trip. So, keep that in mind. But considering we'll chalk that an L. Okay, so the next 4 games for the Spurs are Pacers, Rockets, Nuggets. When do you see the Spurs getting a W, if at all?
Yeah, let me say something first. Let me tell you how much things have changed. Their first road game of the year was their second game of the year at Indiana. I looked this up. Here's how things have changed. The high point man that night in Indianapolis was Josh Richardson. The high rebound man was Jakob Poeltl. And the high assist guy that night was Josh Primo. That's how much things changed between then and now.
Good Lord. That is so crazy.
So what's amusing to me is if they don't beat Indiana here after the rodeo road trip in their first game back to the AT&T Center, I'm laughing because you know as well as I do, Jeff, the Houston Rockets are going to try very, very, very hard to give the Spurs both of those games of that back-to-back.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I'm gonna jump out there and say they're gonna get one of those two because I think Houston actually will probably try harder than San Antonio to lose both of those games.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this extends out to the Indiana, and then the Rockets will all but just roll the ball over every time on the court. Did you see what Tillman Fertitta had to say when they caught him at Mardi Gras? No, he was probably a little lit, drinking a lot of some adult beverages. But he ended that interview by saying, and we're praying for Victor. That should tell you exactly what Houston might do versus San Antonio, huh, Vinny?
With what's on the line. It's just, I don't know.
This is going to be the worst display of basketball ever, those next 2 Rockets games. It's gonna be hot potatoes. Like, you take it. No, you take it. No, your ball. No, my ball. Your ball. No, oops, trip. It's going to be the worst game. Who knows? But that is going to be interesting. Yeah, so I'm with you. I think the Spurs get that W Saturday, March 4th, that back-to-back set versus the Rockets.
Even if they do get one of the two, they're still in line to be one of the top 3, one of the bottom 3. Because Charlotte these days, the Hornets are winning a few more games. So the Spurs, it doesn't destroy their 14% chances if they win one of these two against the Rockets. They're still in that bottom 3.
Yeah. And by the way, we got to make it very clear. I know Spurs fans are saying tank, worst record, but Spurs don't have to have the worst record. They just got to have one of the 3 worst records. So,
and they're in line for that right now.
Yeah. And they're all things are shaping out for that. Before I let you go, and we discussed Wembanyama on the last episode of Locked On Spurs. I don't know if you saw that viral video over this past weekend, of him getting dunked on by some big behemoth guy in the Euro League.
I did. He just backed him down and dunked on him. Yeah.
Does that worry you if the Spurs were to get the number 1 pick of him just getting bodied in the paint, and perhaps, that being his biggest weakness right now.
I thought about that, but Jeff, it's getting him into this program and getting him into their system. So I don't worry too much about that. I mean, it shows you what the Spurs will need to work on with him, and you believe in their way and you believe in their success. So it doesn't bother me too much. I mean, he still is a generational guy, and the talents are off the charts. But that's an example of what he'll run into in the NBA, and they will ready him for that. So I actually I'll turn it around and say I kind of like seeing that, because that shows you what a weakness is and where they need to work with him. Still work with him on.
Yeah, because Vinny, he's going to have a big target on his back, no matter which team he goes to. I mean, everybody's going to be gunning for him, especially the bigs of the NBA. Like, everybody's going to want a piece of him. You're going to want John Morant's going to want to dunk on him. Embiid's going to want to try to body him in the paint. It's coming. So,
but
it's going to be interesting to see. Yeah.
They say, though, that his maturity and just is kind of beyond his years. So I think he'll be ready, if he is, in fact, a San Antonio Spur, to embrace all of the things that will come with being who he will be. Yeah, I think he'll be ready to understand and learn and grow and do all the things that you've got to do. So I'm excited.
Me too. Hopefully the Spurs get that number 1 pick later on this summer. He is Vinny Vinzetta. He is the only person I know who can drive and podcast at the same time. You got talent there, Vinny. You got talent. Yeah, make sure to follow him on Twitter at VVinzetta, VVINZETTA. You do it right now. Again, we have to hit the afterburners on this episode because Vinny's busy. But Vinny, we always appreciate you coming on Locked On Spurs. And for Vinny Vinzetta, I am Jeff Garcia. We're going to put on lock on this episode of Locked On Spurs.